Hey guys, it's Queen Reksai, and I know a lot of you guys have been asking me to do a matchup tier list, and I thought it'd be about time that I made one for you guys since I've been getting back into the game from my hiatus from my PC, since I've been able to play again. Um, Thought it might be a good time to do this again. So, I'm gonna start it off with one of the hardest matchups in my opinion, especially versus um, good Aatrox players. This is a very difficult matchup for Reksai. Just so you guys know, this tier list going to be making. I'm gonna do it from my perspective in like high diamond, low masters elo, because that's what I play mostly. And so all of these champions that I'm going to be ranking, it's going to be from the perspective of a player who plays this champion in a very proficient way. They know what they're doing with the champion. They're not bad. They know what they want to do on the character. For example, in lower elos, especially like in plat and in emerald, Aatrox is way easier to deal with in my opinion. When I was down in those elos, back when I was first initially climbing with Reksai, a lot of these matchups were way easier than I initially thought. And especially Aatrox, this is one of the really big one, and a couple other matchups I'll explain further, but with his Q, he has almost permanent uptime from preventing you from farming, which is a very, very big deal. So, Aatrox can prevent you from farming majority of the game, right? But in the early game, you would think, oh, okay, well, I have an advantage to, farm for a little bit, which you do, but he acquires points into his ability very fast, to the point where for you to be able to scale, he's going to scale at the same time, and he's going to be able to zone you from minions in that time frame, and by the time you're able to actually go in and have the chance to maybe kill him, he will just have his Q permanently up and you'll have no opportunity, because you run the risk of going in with E and him spacing you out with his own E, and like him Eing backwards with Q, and then he can cancel your dash possibly, or he can cancel your reuse of the tunnel, right? Because it's very telegraphed. It's very easy for him to cancel that from you. So a lot of times you just really can't do anything in this matchup, and I would highly recommend avoiding it at all costs. So next we have Akali. And for Akali, she's really not that bad, especially like early in the game. It's a little annoying with their Q being like, it feels like she's like semi-range, but it's much more short than something like an Aatrox, and so it's definitely manageable, I would say. But just keep in mind, when this champ gets level 6, her damage basically doubles, and so if you're going more of a bruiser build, she can one-shot you very easily from like 90% HP at level 6 if you're not careful. So you need to play for your sustain super hard in this matchup. But overall, I'd give it an A, because it's really not bad for you to be able to sustain her out. You can get your Qs in here and there. You can, unless she spaces you absolutely perfectly, you can get a knock-up on her. And you can use your sustain throughout the matchup by Wing and Eing the minions and all this stuff to be able to survive and whittle her down. This matchup really isn't too bad as long as you don't get caught off by her R whenever she gets it, especially if you don't have your own R. If you don't have your R when she Rs you, this matchup feels very difficult to deal with, because then she'll get a free kill on you and all this stuff. But usually in like an upfront scenario, if you can't knock her up before she hits you, there's no point in fighting this champion. There's no point, because she'll get a shield, and then, like, let's say she auto Qs you and then you knock her up, let's say. Well, now while she's in the knockup, she has a timer on her Q that's going down, and as soon as she lands, she's going to use her true damage on you. So usually you don't want to go in that scenario. Usually you want to bait out her E into you, and you knock her up out of it. Or you could play using the wave, because you have better wave clear than she does. The most annoying thing about Cho'Gath for Reksai is that he basically has 2 CC abilities versus you. His first CC ability is his Q. It knocks you up. It can cancel your tunnel, especially the reuse of your tunnel. Like I said before, it's very telegraphed, so it's very easy for him to just knock you up and stop you from using it again. But also his W is very potent against you, because if you're stuck in burrow form, you can't get out of your form to get your abilities off. You'll just be stuck in the ground auto attacking, and so you'll be locked into this auto, and you won't be able to do anything for like, I don't know, 1.5 seconds or something like that, right? And if you're above ground, obviously the main thing it does is just prevent you from going into the ground and getting your heal in very specific scenarios that make it important to do that. But mostly it's when you're in the ground when it's a problem, and you need to be very, very careful about his W usage. But it's not hard to space him out. Just play around. Like, he has a lot of wave clear and he has a lot of sustain, so, but your sustain will still be way greater than his, so you can still whittle him out of lane and you can still play around him. But when you're 50% HP, he can Q you, E you, W you, and then R you, and there is nothing you can do. There's genuinely nothing you can do, and so you need to play very careful when you're in that little threshold, because they're like, let's say, oh, I'm fighting Aatrox, right? And he goes in when I'm 50% and he thinks he can kill me. Well, I can still get away if I play it right. But if I play versus Cho'Gath, I cannot do anything if he plays it right, right? So just be careful, but overall it's not a bad matchup. He will outscale you, so I wouldn't really recommend building tank. I'd recommend building bruiser versus him, but yeah. So we got another kind of difficult matchup, which is Darius. And in this matchup, it's not bad to build Phase Rush if you would like, but mostly he has a lot of all-in on you, and it would be very scary, especially if you aren't building tank, because you need to play your windows very, like, you have a very specific window of opportunity to fight against him. And so, you know, if he wastes his Q on the wave or something, you can go in knowing that, hey, like, you know, he can't get his heal off plus an extra stack of bleed, right? But the main thing you really want to be scared of is his E, so you can usually go back and forth in range to bait out his E. If you don't do that, let's say you E forward, which is a death sentence, by the way. If you E forward into Darius, you will die, and like 90% of the time you will die, because he'll E forward and he will just stick on you and auto, and as soon as you're about to get away, he will E you. Even if you have your E ready, even if you have your tunnel ready, as soon as you try to tunnel away, he will pull you. So you literally just have to, you know, do your combo, and then he'll do his combo, and then he'll just auto you and run at you until you use your E. So you have to wait until he uses yours, because he will cancel yours, if that makes sense. And with the amount of stick potential, like, his stick potential isn't crazy, right? But the fact that you basically have to let him hit you makes this matchup very hard, especially if you're not experienced with reksai. So for me personally, I put Fiora in S, but I wouldn't be surprised if people would think because she's an A. But I think that once in the beginning, right, versus Fiora, it's very even in my opinion. She has like a slight edge. I wouldn't say by much at all, but a very slight edge, especially in the first like 3 levels. But once you get your R, it becomes completely even in my opinion. But the real kicker in this matchup is she has to predict your knockup, and that's very hard for her to do because it's basically instant. It's like a cinch flip. How are you supposed to predict a cinch flip? I don't know. It's just instant, right? And so how is she supposed to predict when you're gonna W? So you can use a lot of mind games on Fioras, because they're not gonna know, like, oh, like, when is this guy gonna knock up? But the real kicker for this matchup is that whenever you're ahead, it's like impossible for her to win, because you just have so much agency versus her that you can just completely steamroll her. You can use the knockup mind game to your complete advantage when you're ahead, and it feels really good. So in my opinion, this is one of, like, if I see this matchup, I'm really happy because I don't even know if I've lost this matchup once. I may have lost it once, but like maybe I can't even remember. Every single time I see Fiora, I'm like, oh great, this is gonna be awesome because you know I'm gonna win. So I like this matchup a lot. Garen, I'd say he's probably around a B tier because a lot of Garen players like to run Ignite, and so they have a shit ton of kill pressure versus you, which feels pretty bad. But the main thing is that he also has a silence like Cho'Gath, so you can't do anything. You can't, you know, if he gets on top of you and you're in kill threshold, you just messed up. You have to preemptively be ready for him to jump on you, and that kind of sucks. But with this execute, and usually Garen's running Ignite, it's hard for you to find windows, especially in fights. But earlier in the game, it's definitely more feasible. It's like later in the game, once he starts to get like Stride Breaker and stuff like that, it makes it very difficult for you, in my opinion. But there are definitely ways for you to play around it, and your tunnel makes it kind of hard for him to like run you down because he doesn't have a Darius pool. He has no way of holding you down. He just has a way to make himself faster. But as long as you keep yourself relatively healthy, which is it's most of these matchups are kind of like that, where as long as you can keep yourself kind of healthy, you'll be fine. It's just he has a very threatening kill pressure on you because he just has such high damage, and they usually run Ignite and all true damage and all this stuff. But it's really not that bad. I'd either put it, you know, either A or B. I'd definitely put it above Camille. But I got Gnar. Gnar's not horrible. It's still a little annoying. It's versus good Gnar players, it's definitely a lot worse, I'd say, because they usually just auto you in like range form, and then only like actually try to contest you when they're in mega form, like they should. And as soon as you go away, even before you get on top of them, they'll hop away. If they have good reaction times, they'll hop away, and they won't even hop on top of you because you can just cancel it with your knockup. If a Gnar tries to hop on your head and you cancel it, you know that they're not a good Gnar player because they just screwed themselves because now they're in melee range of you. Kind of like how Quinn E works, which I'll explain in a bit. But what Gnar players will do is they'll just auto you from range, and then as soon as you E in, they'll just hop away before you even get done using your E. And then they'll run you down with their W passive and all this stuff. So it is kind of frustrating, but you can find angles, especially if you do build like Stride Breaker and stuff like that. There are angles for you to be able to fight Gnar. You just obviously keep your health high, use your passive as much as you can. So okay, we got Gangplank. It's another matchup that I actually like a lot. I'd probably put it in S as well. This matchup used to be, like, in my opinion, Reksai's best matchup back when I like first started playing Reksai top. Back when Prowler's Claw was still around and all this stuff, because you would just build Prowlers and then go in and pop them. And even before that, you just did so much damage innately that he couldn't really do anything, and you just pop him immediately. And back then I did build Ignite and all this stuff, and there was nothing you really do, but Gangplank now is, you know, still not bad. Only problem is he can kind of zone you with barrels if he's good enough, and yeah, that's a little frustrating, but it's not nearly as bad as something like a, you know, like a Aatrox or a range matchup or something like that. And you know, he's not horrible. In my opinion, he's really nice to fight. Kind of like Fiora, like once you get an initial lead on him, you can just run away with it. And it's really, in my opinion, not too hard to get that lead unless he has Ignite. If he has Ignite, then you kind of just have to play for the waves and stuff and just make him waste his Ignite, and then you can use your either your TP advantage, or you can try to look for a fight once he doesn't have Ignite. But as long as you guys are like on an even playing ground, it's definitely even, but as soon as you get an inch on them, you can take a mile. And in my opinion, that's a matchup that I like a lot, because you can, as long as you play well early, you can just go along with it. Okay, this is definitely another matchup I like. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I should put an S or A because it's definitely like, I don't know. I've had a lot of success versus Gragas matchups actually. The only issue is when I fight Gragas players is whenever I get ganked by, you know, their jungler, they usually have a lot of tools that make it basically impossible for me to leave because they can cancel your tunnel 2 different ways, which is really frustrating. So like a lot of times when you get ganked, you have to flash and then the jungler will just come back again. That's the only thing I don't like about this matchup. But in early game, they have like pretty low damage for a top laner and they have a lot of mana issues, so you can abuse the fuck out of that. You can use that to your complete advantage, and as long as you are conscious of this, you can basically abuse the Gragas player in the early game. And even when they do start to get items, your sustain will matter much more than the damage they can deal, and obviously they'll still be draining mana, but each time they back it, that'll be less and less important. But when they go in on you, like, you know, EW you or whatever, sometimes you can try to avoid it and knock them up, or like in the moment after you can knock them up and do a quick combo with Titanic Hydra and stuff, and then, you know, they lose HP, and the way they get HP back is over a long course of time. You get HP back in a much more rapid pace than a Gragas player does, and so overall I think it's just a better matchup for you. As long as you play safe for ganks, you should be fine. Okay, Gwen, this matchup is really bad in my opinion. Even if you're ahead, it's very, very hard for you to fight Gwen, because if she lands her R, all of her R's, if she lands like 1 Q, and like a lot of them take an Ignite TP, and they'll just like completely mow you down. If you're 3-0 and she's 0-3, she can still kill you easily. And so in my opinion, this is a really annoying matchup, especially if you're not able to get a lead. It just feels impossible. It feels very difficult, and I would try to avoid it if you could. I don't see too many Gwen players, so it's really not something I run into a lot, but whenever I do, it's very frustrating, and I'm like obligated to build Bruiser. Like I saw a lot of Gwens back when I was building more tank, and like I basically had to force myself to build Bruiser, because if I built tank, I was just completely trolling the game away, because she would just shred me. So I'd say this is another like pretty frustrating matchup, but mostly I just hate Alawi, and I don't know how much of this is just me hating Alawi versus it's actually bad for reksai. But the main redeeming factor for this matchup that makes it like not as bad, doesn't feel as bad, is that her tentacles actually give you full fury if you hit them. So if you auto Q them like really quick, which, you know, makes it really hard for her to react to them, to you hitting them, you get 50 fury, which like helps you heal a bunch. But you're gonna be stuck on her tower all game. She's gonna get a bunch of free plates. There's not really much you can do. You just kind of have to let her push into you. Like like in my opinion, the only way for you to beat her is for her to like overextend enough where she's like either being ganked at a really crappy time for her specifically, or she takes enough turret shots which fuck her over, and you're able to go in because you were able to heal enough. But the likelihood of that for her to mess up like that is completely on her. There's nothing you can do personally, and so it's definitely something that's not very favorable for you. So Aurelia it's definitely not, I would say, your best matchup, but it's definitely not really bad at all. I'd say it's really good. I'm definitely leaning on S, but I don't know if I should put on S, because mostly you're able to play around her E really well, and if you ever mess up, you have a very good escape tool versus her, because if she E's on top of you, right? Now you're stunned, right? Okay, so her stun is gone. Now she's gonna Q on top of you and like auto you, and let's say you're like, okay, I don't like this trade, I'm gonna E away. So you E away, and then she Qs on top of you again. So now she's used both of her Qs, so she has no Q, she has no stun, right? And so now you can knock her up and return the favor of the damage per se, right? And this is the scenario where you mess up, okay? This is the like, unless like you're completely overextended or something, but if you're in the middle of the lane, this is a scenario where you messed up, you can literally leave. Like, there's nothing you can do, and if she tries to keep contesting you on you leaving, you can punish her for it. And even then, you can threaten her Q, like her using her Q on minions with your knockup. I don't know, like, to me personally, I feel like it's a very good matchup, so I'm actually gonna put it in S, as long as like you're very conscious about just not fighting at all when she either A, has her stacks, or like you're ahead per se. If she has stacks in your head, you can fight. If she has stacks in your even, don't fight, okay? If she stuns you, leave. That's what I say. If she stuns me, I'm leaving. And if she tries to contest me on me leaving, I'll knock her up and to keep leaving. So we got a matchup where he has a stun, he has a fairly potent dash, and he has a good way of DPSing you, which is a lot of things that Reksai has a hard time dealing with. But he has very well-rounded pieces to his kit, right? And his E is very telegraphed, and there's very easy ways for you to react to it, okay? And so it's really not too hard for you to react to his E with your tunnel and get out of a sticky situation. And if he wastes his E, or you're able to bait it out, or you can even knock him up while he's in his E and, you know, run away or whatever, then you have this opportunity to fight him back, which isn't bad. As long as you don't take DPS heavy fights, you should win. As long as you play around his E, you should be able to win. So I think it's a fairly fair matchup, and so I'm gonna put it at the top of B. This is a matchup I'd say is pretty bad for you, because it's kind of similar to Gnar. I'd say I put it right next to Gnar. It's very similar to Gnar, where he's going to sit in his range form majority of the game, and as soon as you go in, either, you know, he's gonna, you know, try and run away with his E, you know, like the little gate thing, or he's going to turn into melee form and kick you away, and then he'll just like Q on top of you and all this stuff. And he has very potent damage, a lot more so than Gnar, and so there's not like too much you can do with this matchup. You kind of just have to either play around your jungler, or kind of like maybe wait out his mana in the early game. That's like the most you could really do. Actually, I think I'm just gonna put him in C, like top of C, because it does feel pretty bad. I'd say it does feel worse than Gnar in my opinion, because Gnar is a clear point where you can go in or not go in, and Jace, it feels much more like, oh, he has his knockback up, so I can't do anything. And like, he has insane damage, but like, even if I try to sustain off the wave, he'll just keep poking me down. Much more potent than a Gnar could, if that makes sense. His damage is just much more high, and his way of getting rid of you just is more potent, in my opinion. Pretty good matchup as well. So obviously she's not very strong early game, so you're able to abuse her early game. So try your best to abuse her as much as you can earlier in the game. Once she gets 6, she becomes ranged, and that's a little annoying, but you can deal with it. But you need to E in when she, like, imagine she's in range for your tunnel, right? She needs to be a little bit closer than that, because as soon as you use her tunnel ability, she's going to use her W and then run past you, just barely past you, with her extra movement speed, and then just auto you down, probably with fleet footwork, right? And so there's a very specific point where you can tunnel in and she can't get away from you, and you need to play around that point. You need to play like your tunnel is a shorter range, and then it makes the matchup much more easy for you, in my opinion, if you don't overshoot your tunnel, or I guess undershoot is what I'm trying to say. But that's only when she hits 6. When she hits 11, it actually becomes really hard, because her damage actually picks up, especially when she gets her item. but by that point, like if you don't have a kill on her, then it's kind of on you at that point. Like I played games where like, oh, only was able to go even with the kill, and it's just like I get like by that point I'm starting to get outscaled, and there's nothing I can really do. And so you really need to build a lead early on, like most champions at the kill, but it's still same application for reksai. So Kennen matchup, I actually really don't like. I think I've only played Kennen matchup maybe once, and it really wasn't that good. So take this with a grain of salt, because I'm not really sure in my elo, because last time I played it I was like an emerald, so I really don't know the Kennen matchup too well. But I mean, it seems like it'd be kind of like a worse version of the Kale matchup. And like maybe kind of similar to Nara, where like when you go in, he's gonna E away, and it's gonna be like he's gonna be super fast, and then he's just gonna auto you down. It's actually a guy that's very frustrating to deal with. Not only because his Q applies grievous wounds, but it also pulls you back, and he has a good amount of DPS. So the main way you get to fight him is mostly when he uses his W on the wave, and good Kled players will save their initial W on you. And so they'll just wait until they're actually able to get on top of you and actually fight you until they level up their W. But versus a good Kled player, this match was very frustrating. But versus like a lower level Kled, where they kind of just use their W whenever, it's really not that bad. But for the elo I'm playing, it's actually fairly frustrating, I would say. And just try your best to play around his W and be very careful about his R, because he can basically CC chain you with his Q into his R, and then he can double dash on top of you. So Cassante, this actually used to be a very frustrating matchup. It used to be before he got a bunch of his nerfs, and also before reksai kind of turned into a bruiser tank champion. And so now it's actually a much better matchup for you. I'd say it's one of your better matchups. It's definitely something you would rather see in the lane, because your sustain versus him is insane, and his kill threshold versus you is a lot lower compared to other champions, in my opinion. And as long as you save your E for his ultimate, you should be fine in this matchup. And don't get baited by his knockups. He has a lot of knockups that can really basically cheese you into a situation where you just die. And so just be very careful, and you don't need to E in. You never need to tunnel in. And just don't get caught off guard by his knockups, and don't let him use his third Q into W into R into his tower. Like, that's the surefire way to lose lane. If you don't troll for the knockups, you should win. We got Malphite. This is a matchup where, again, that you don't really want to go tank. You would rather go bruiser here, and I'd say it's another good matchup for you. It's kind of a free lane where he doesn't really deal enough damage to do anything to you. You just sustain everything back. Even if he goes his AP build, you're completely fine. The only thing you need to worry about is in team fights. His R's insane, but like, okay, who cares? You got a good knockup too. But in lane, this is not a bad matchup for you at all. Just out sustain him. That's really it. That's all you need to do. Like, it's not hard at all. Try to keep try to keep damaging him, kind of like Garen. Malphite passive doesn't come back up until he hasn't been damaged for a period of time, and so it's kind of similar to Garen, where Garen wants to be out of combat for a while to heal back. Malphite wants to be out of combat for a while to get his shield back, and so make sure that you're constantly hitting him with Qs and tagging him here and there, so you can delay his shield procs and get more damage on him, because he has horrible sustain in this lane, and you can completely abuse him. Got a matchup that is pretty frustrating. It's kind of, I'd say, it's like a mix between the Darius and the Camille matchup, where like Camille, he can ult you and hold you down, and unless you have your own ultimate, it's actually very hard for you to do anything, because you kind of need that R to have that invulnerability for a moment, have that moment where they can't hit you, and you can kind of reposition yourself in the fight. And even then, you can actually use your R to dodge his Q and stuff like that. But a lot of it is that he has a lot of uptime with his passive and his Q, and he has a good pull with his E. And so, another matchup where if you E forward, if you tunnel forward, you will die, kind of like Darius. So you need to respect him. You need to be aware that you will die if you go in too heavy here, and you need to play around his Q and his E cooldown as best as you can, and really respect his R. You can outplay this matchup, but it's definitely Mordekaiser favored, and you definitely can play it, but it's definitely very hard. Even in lower MMRs, Mordekaiser is just kind of so easy that it's just he just face rolls you if he gets an opportunity. We got Mundo. It's definitely a good matchup. Definitely recommend this matchup. I don't know if I should do A or S, but either way, he's, main thing is just dodging his Qs, and you have a lot more damage, especially even in the early game. You have a bunch of damage as long as you dodge his Qs and be conscious about his Qs. He has really bad wave clear, which is very abusable, and a nice thing about Dr. Mundo was hey, I can't knock him up, so it's kind of hard for me to do a combo. But when you knock him up and you get rid of his passive, you're dealing an extra chunk of damage. It deals damage to Mundo when he loses that passive for a knockup. So you're actually getting extra damage in that you wouldn't normally have because of his passive. So it actually hurts the Mundo a bunch, especially in the early game. A lot of times I'm able to kill Mundo pre-6, and even during level 6, his ultimate doesn't heal him that much, especially early in the game, in my opinion, and it's very easily abusable. So I think for that, I'm actually gonna put him as he's not bad. Alright, so we got Nasus. Nasus isn't really that bad. Kind of like Kale, where you need to, take advantage of him early game, or else he'll kind of spiral out of control. It's definitely frustrating because his W makes it kind of annoying for you to fight him sometimes, and he can try to space you out with his W. But usually when that's off cooldown, it's pretty easy to fight him. When he has R, obviously don't fight Nasus with his R is insanely strong. He completely doubles his power level at that point when he presses R. His R is so much more important than yours, and so don't even try to contest it. Even if you think you're gonna kill him, just play it safe and just back up. Just back up. Don't even let him abuse you while he's in his R, because he's gonna get healing back because of his passive. He's gonna get a shit ton of Qs, so he's gonna deal a shit ton of damage, and because of those extra Qs, he's getting more healing from his passive. And so it's just mainly that. Be aware that his R is a really big steroid, and that he can abuse you if he uses it right. So we got Olaf. It's actually a matchup that also it's supposed to be like Mordekaiser, like Darius, where he can kind of run you down, but it feels like a worse version of Garen for Reksai. So he can't really do anything until he gets his R, because you can kind of space him out. When he tries to go in on you, you can just knock him up, and then if he keeps trying to go on you, you can just E away, and your sustain in the lane is greater than his sustain until he gets Ravenous Hydra. Once he gets Ravenous Hydra, it's actually pretty frustrating because of his sustain so high. You can, at that point, if you want, you can get Bramble Vest or Executioner's Calling or something, but he's actually a lot more abusable than you would think, as long as you don't let him DPS you down. Just QW, auto Q him, and then bite, and then E away. There's nothing he can really do. There's no way for him to dash to you, or to stun you, or to pull you. He just has to Q you and just run at you. But you'll make so much distance that it won't even matter. And like by the time, unless you're extremely overextended and he presses ghost and you're low, he shouldn't be able to kill you in like 95% of scenarios. So we got actually like the first tank matchup I'd say is actually kind of bad for reksai. I wouldn't say, I'd say it's either bottom of B or like top of C. I think I'm gonna put top of C here because every single time I play this matchup, it's like his damage is way more than you think it would be. Like Ornn damage is ridiculous. I don't know how this champ does so much damage, but he can genuinely like one-shot you as a tank, and I don't understand why. Also, he has a very easy time canceling your tunnel, so if you overextend even in the slightest, he has a pretty easy time punishing you for that. And his passive getting items makes it very hard for you to actually abuse him, because even if you try to abuse his health or his mana, he can just buy a ruby crystal or a sapphire crystal. It doesn't matter. And so it's actually a pretty frustrating matchup, and for a tank, it's probably your worst matchup in my opinion. Okay, and then we got Pantheon. This is like it's like a mini Aatrox almost, where he's gonna try and poke you out with his Qs, and you just kind of play around that, but it's not as prevalent as Aatrox Qs, because Aatrox can hold his Qs for a long time. Pantheon, when he Qs, you have a moment of time to get your farm in or do what you need. And also, you can actually out-sustain a Pantheon in the lane, and so there can be times where, you know, he will go in and you might be able to knock him up out of his W, because you can do that, and a good Pantheon player will try to avoid that as best as they can. But if you're able to get small chip damage on him, you're able to out-sustain him. And obviously that's one of Reksai's strongest points. And a lot of Pantheon players will take Ignite, so you gotta be careful of kill threshold. And like level 6, they get a bunch of armor pen, so like you gotta be really careful, because they deal a lot of damage, and so you have to be very careful. But there are opportunities for you to basically punish him in the long term, like over time. And so it's actually a very manageable matchup in my opinion. Once again, a lot of these matchups that are really good for you, you just completely out-sustain them. And she has a hard time out-sustaining Reksai unless she's able to constantly proc her shield. But you can deny that if you play well. Her Q, like, she doesn't really have much range on her Q, and so as long as you don't really like get too cocky and get under tower or anything and then get ganks and all this stuff, and you're not able to E away because of her W, you should be able to win. So it's actually not bad. Just play for sustain, like I keep saying, and you should be able to win this matchup pretty easy. Okay, so we get Quinn. So Quinn's actually not too bad, as long as mostly if you're able to knock her up out of her E, so her little vault that she does. It's actually not too bad of a matchup, but a lot of good Quinn players will just wait until you're out of burrowed form, so they'll just hold their E for eternity. But again, another matchup where you can sustain. And yeah, there's not really much to it. You just gotta play safe and don't get poked out too much, and try to cancel the dash with your knock-up, and you know, don't die to Ignite, because they usually like to take Ignite. So, alright, got Renekton. It's kind of another matchup. It's kind of similar to Nasus, where you kind of have to just like really respect the. I don't know why Olaf's so low. I think he should be like next to Poppy. Anyways, I'm sorry. So Renekton, you really gotta respect his R, because again, it really roids him up. I wouldn't say like it roids him up to the degree like as much of a multiplier it gives Nasus, in my opinion, but it definitely is still something you have to respect. And even when he doesn't have his ultimate, you still need to kind of try your best to space him out, because he's going to try and contest you on the wave a bunch. If you can contest Renekton on Fury, on his Fury, a lot of times it'll make your life a million times easier, because he needs Fury for him to do a bunch of things in this kit. And so if you can get into a position where you can not zone him from the wave, but like at least stop him from last hitting the wave, you can basically snowball a lead from there. But if you're never able to get to a point, at most you can just do is go even, and like, you know, just play for getting Titanic, and just play for doing your like combos with Titanic. But the only problem with that is once he gets Ravenous, if he goes for Ravenous, he's going to basically just take your beating, and then you're going to take his beating, and then both of you guys are just going to sustain. So you guys are just at like a standstill basically until you try to DPS him down, but he wins the DPS. You know, it's like pretty even. So, alright. So this is another matchup. I'd say it's very bad for Reksai. It's not as bad as Aatrox, but Riven is very frustrating, because especially good Riven players will use like the tip of their Q to like knock you up, because if they Q like right on top of you, you can cancel it. But if they Q to like the edge, they can actually prevent it from you being able to knock them up out of the final Q. Also, they will use they'll basically try to CC chain you and then dash away, so you won't be able to fight them back. So they're like, you know, Q on top of you, and then they'll W, right? So you can't do anything in either of those instances. And then they'll auto, and then they'll E away. And there's nothing you can do. There's no way you can hit them back. And so a lot of Riven players will do this, and they'll just accumulate a lead off of that, and there's not really anything you do, because usually they take Ignite and Nimbus Cloak and all this stuff. And so you just kind of have to play back. But, oh man, my throat. Now I will say, if you are not fighting a good Riven player, this matchup's like up here. It's really fucking easy. But as soon as you start fighting good Riven players, this matchup becomes very, very hard. Like if you fight like an Emerald Riven or a Plat Riven, it's just, in my opinion, it's free low. But yeah, that's just how it is. Rumble, it's another matchup. It's very similar to Gwen, where it's very, very hard. But it's like you can still have windows, but it's in the same sense as Gwen is, well, I can't hold you down, but I can DPS the living hell out of you, and so there's nothing you can do if you try to actually fight me. And so, like, you know, if you try to contest the Rumble, he's just gonna pop a shield to the moment of damage you deal won't really matter. You'll only be able to get a little bit of damage, and he's just sitting there with his flames burning on you while you knocked him up and just cooking you alive. And he has this magic penetration, so even if you build MR, his magic penetration from his little missiles, his E, will just shred you completely. And usually they take Ignite too. So it's it's definitely not a matchup where you can just face tank at all. You have to find like instances where you can basically get really short trades in, because he will DPS the living hell out of you. Alright, let's see, set. There's actually, I actually don't know if it's still in the game or not. I say it's bottom of B. It's simply like for the more like traditional top laners, it's not as bad. Like the big bulky dudes that beat your face, and it's not as bad. But I don't know if the bug is still around, but there is a bug where if Set E's you and he pulls you in and you're burrowed and you try to knock up, it'll basically act like you're silenced and just auto attack instead of doing anything else. And it actually does this for like a second and a half straight. So I haven't played a set matchup in I don't know, like a week or two. So I don't know if it's still in the game. And every time I play the set matchup, I instantly assume this bug is still here because of how fucking detrimental it is, because you have no response, right? And so I just always play like it's there. Right now, I need to check again, but that bug is very detrimental to the matchup. If it's still here, this is where he should be. If it's not, he'd probably be a little bit higher. But overall, this is another matchup where you just take really short trades, and you can out-sustain him. He still has pretty good sustain because of his passive, and usually I run Diller and Shield. But if you take too big of a trade at once, he will E you and then W you, and then like he can all in you at that point, because even though he just used 2 big skills, he can still auto you down. And so you got to be really wary of like, okay, like, oh, normally on a, let's say, Cho'Gath, my kill threshold would be 30% at this particular point in the game, right? Oh, okay, but I'm fighting Set, so if I do anything, you know, if I do any big damage and he has any chance to respond, he's going to EW and then R, and like, I won't be able to kill. Like, he needs to be like 20% HP. So you gotta be very careful with that. But just, you know, try to combo him down, because it's very hard for him to react because he can't build up his W meter. And if he tries to Q you down, you can just try to E away. So, not too bad. Shen, I'd say it's another B tier. Not like too horrible. It's kind of annoying because his Q deals a good amount of damage. I'm pretty sure it deals max health damage. I think that's why it deals so much damage. And his R is pretty frustrating. But you can try and like keep vision on the Shen, and also a good way to fight Shen is just keep shoving the wave over and over. And Reksai's shove definitely isn't too bad, especially since you'll be rushing. For me personally, I rush Titanic Hydra, so I'm usually building Tunneler into Tiamat, and so my shove is really good even early in the game. And so you're able to keep the wave shoved in, so even if he gets a TP down bot lane or whatever, you get like at least a plate or 2, and he misses multiple waves. And so it's not horrible. He can't really lock you down. Like, he can E you, but like that's his dash and his stun at the same time. And so like you kind of have to play really bad for you to be caught off guard by a Shen. The only way, in my opinion, you can be caught off guard is by his damage, but you should be able to sustain everything back because he has no sustain in the matchup. So yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I'd probably put it a bit higher, like run Camille. Okay, so we got Singe. This is, I say it's an S tier matchup because you're able to usually combo him before he's able to get his E off. I mean, main thing that's really annoying is it's gonna proxy, but it doesn't really matter who you're playing. He's gonna proxy you anyways. But you have a good counter to that, which is your tunnels, so you actually have a fairly good response to his proxy, and your champion, Reksai, is also good at proxying herself, and so it's really not that bad for you to fight a Singed, because in the 1v1, you win always, unless he's like, 5-0 or whatever. You have a good proxy yourself, so tanking the wave isn't a bad option, and you have a halfway decent response to when he proxies with your tunnels, so it's really not that bad. Okay, that's Sion. I'd say it's an A tier matchup. I used to think it was worse, but that was back when you used to build a lot of AD. It's not as bad now because you're building tank and you're able to sustain much better than you used to, but the main reason I thought it was so bad back then, and this portion still sucks versus Sion, is when he has his Q up, he can actually space you out with really well. A good Sion player will space you out with this Q, and this play basically at the range of his Q, and you cannot, like, unless you like time it pretty well, you can't E away. But like, you cannot just have to take the brunt of it. You can't run at him. You can't E towards him, and so you just kind of have to take the knockup. But I mean, you have good sustain versus him. His damage isn't really crazy or anything. You can out damage him. It's really not a bad matchup at all. So as long as you don't get too caught off guard by ganks or anything, and don't let him space you up this Q too much, you should win. Definitely like in lower elos. I know I was talking about my MMR, but I guess I'll throw in this. But in lower elos, he's definitely an S tier because silent players, but in that elo, in lower elos, don't really do such things. But I know like the higher elo I got, the more I noticed silent players doing that kind of stuff. Tom Kench, for a tank, he does a pretty good amount of damage, and he has a pretty good amount of sustain. It's not really hard for him to achieve it. Like even if you try to fight him in a very short instance, he can Q you, and now he dealt a good amount of damage. You're slowed, and he healed, and he gets his passive stacks, which can lead him A to his R or B to another Q. And so he actually has a pretty potent 1v1, and good sustain versus you, and can try his best to poke you out. So, I mean, that's okay. You kind of just have to play around his Q. Like, it's like a more potent Dr. Mundo Q, in my opinion. So, let's see. Teemo. Gotta love Teemo. It's a C tier. If you E forward, he's going to try and use his movement speed to run away. Also, if you E forward, as soon as you knock up, a lot of times you'll knock up and they'll like time their Q as soon as you knock up, so you can't auto Q, and so you have to just stand there like a sitting duck, and by the time the Teemo lands again, he's able to get an auto off on you. So like you're supposed to have this advantage, but you by knocking him up and making melee range, but you're just at a disadvantage anyways. And so you kind of just have to like only go in if he uses Q to poke you, and buy Oracle Lens, and buy MR, and try to get to a point where you can go in and actually deal damage. But like especially like earlier in the game, if he has Ignite, don't even try it. I wouldn't even try it. So okay, we got Tryndamere versus good Tryndamere plays. This is like a B. He's pretty frustrating versus like lower MMR Tryndamere is like a A, but a lot of good Tryndameres will kind of just like try to zone you from the wave and just play for the wave, because I don't know what it is about that champ, but he does a bunch of damage. It seems like he does a bunch of damage to me, but you kind of just have to play for your rotations like you normally would. But he has a decent amount of sustain, and he's also like basically just as slippery as you, to make it where it's kind of like he's just you but more damage oriented, and like he's just gonna try and whittle you down. And so it's I would say it's like an even matchup, but it's definitely a little frustrating in the early game, I would say. Until you get your Titanic Hydra, it feels pretty frustrating. Okay, so we got Urgot. This is actually a matchup I enjoy a lot, because to me it's like a skill matchup. Yeah, I think I put it in A. I'd consider it a skill matchup, because you're actually able to deny his E forward with your W, but he can actually go through with it if you knock up too early. Like let's say you're right on top of him, and like he presses E and then you knock up, his E will still buffer and go through. But let's say he E's and then he just started the dash and then you knock up, then you stopped him. So like in melee range, it's really hard to do for the reksai perspective, but from like more of a range, like towards the tip of the E, it's a lot easier for the reksai perspective. But overall, he has like pretty good damage. Play for sustain, not too bad. But the range is a little annoying. But it's not too bad overall, because you can try and bait out his E, and then go in there because it's kind of short range. Or you could just try to sustain out the matchup. But in the 1v1, it's not too bad. Volibear, I'd say it's a B. It's kind of frustrating because like sometimes they'll buffer their E and their Q together while they're getting knocked up. They'll like Q in and then E, and then you'll knock them up. But usually if you knock them up, they stun you at the same time, and so you can't respond. And then by the time you guys are done, his E lands, And so then he gets not only the damage plus the shield, and then you just kind of have to concede the trade from that point. But if you can find a way to play around that, or like bait out his E, then you can actually have a decent time into the matchup. His passive with the lightning strikes and all that stuff gives him an opportunity to push the wave really well, especially level 1. If he can E all 6 of the minions and just get complete priority of the lane. Like, there's nothing you can do to stop him. And so if he does that, don't even try to walk up level 1, because his level 1, in my opinion, is it's disgusting. I don't know if I want to say it's the best level 1, but I think it is, because he can basically get all the minions on his side, like, the moment the game starts. But yeah. Warwick, I don't know why Warwick's here. I mean, I guess I'll rate him. I'd say he's A tier. Not too bad. Just play around his E. He will get mana issues because your sustain and his sustain is basically evenly matched, and eventually he will run out of mana, especially early in the game. But I mean, just keep going for it, and eventually you will be able to whittle him down. In my opinion, you do win that. I would say he probably has a slight sustain advantage over you, especially when he gets low. That's like where the sustain really shows. But since you have no mana, you can actually do something, and you can actually have a dash, right? So like, if things get shady for you, you just dash away. I mean, unless he has R and all this stuff, but you see what I mean. Yasuo. So Yasuo in the early game is S. Yasuo in like the mid game, when it gets like move speed and damage and all this, is an A, I would say. But I'm just gonna put him at S, because if you lane versus Yasuo, you're actually able to abuse him early in the game. Because you have more sustain than him, obviously. You have a good way to get rid of his shield with your burrowed Q. And you kind of just stat check him, and if he is on top of you, you can easily knock him up, and it kind of like disorients the Yasuo and all this stuff. But I mean, I'd say like not as much as it used to be a good matchup, but it's a very good matchup for you. Yone versus good Yone players, I'd say this is like a B. Versus like lower MMRs, it's like A or S. But versus like good Yones, it's pretty hard to deal with him, because he kind of can just space you out by using his Q on repeat, like his low knockup, and kind of trying to poke you with his third Q and his W, and then try to use his E as well, the movement speed from that, to space you out. The only time I've really been able to have success with this matchup is when he Qs forward and he misses, and then I'm able to return a trade onto him, and then like he takes, like, let's say now he's at like 70%, right? And then I recover, right? So now I'm at, let's say, 95, right? Or whatever it is. And then I can go in after, because now I know he doesn't have his E and he's lower on HP. So, pretty big. Yorick, I would say this matchup's pretty bad for Reksai. You have a really hard time dealing with his ghouls plus Maiden. There's not really much you can do. It's kind of just, you're kind of just like a sitting duck, and you just have to either be able to kill the Yorick in the early game before you get to 6, or kind of maybe wait for your jungler or something, or wait for the Yorick to waste his Maiden on you or something like that. But it's kind of out of your control, and it's definitely not favorable for you. I don't know why Vayne isn't here, and I don't know why Aurora isn't here. Well, it's at 13.4. She wasn't out yet. Never mind. But okay, so Aurora would be like probably B or C tier, probably bottom of B tier. Okay, because you have to find an opportunity to go in on her. She has, like little dashes that she can use against you, but they're not really big enough to warrant being too difficult to deal with. And your sustain versus her is horrible. And so you actually have, compared to other ranged top laners, you actually have a lot more opportunities against her, in my opinion. But let's say Vayne. Vayne's fucking horrible, man. You can't do anything versus that champ. You just kind of gotta pray that she sucks and that you get ganked. That's kind of all you can do. Because you E in, she knocks you back. and then she just autos you down, Qs forward, autos you down, all this stuff. The only thing you can really do is just like wait until you get damaged, and then like E on top of her, flash, and just hope and pray that you can deal enough damage to kill her. That's it. That's all you can really do. It's not a good matchup for you at all, in my opinion. But I don't know if I'm missing anybody, because I just looked at a list and just went with it. But if you guys think of any matchups that you want me to talk about, let me know, and I'll respond to your comment in the comment section, okay? But I guess this is it. Alright, I'll see you guys. Bye.